November 12, 1965. 0:02 NBC Studio 6B, The Tonight Show. 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time. 50 million Americans watch Frank Sinatra point his finger at Clint Eastwood's chest and say the words that were supposed to destroy him. You call that acting? My gardener has more range than you, pal. The studio audience gasped. Johnny Carson's mouth fell open. Dean Martin stopped smiling for the first time in his career. And Clint Eastwood, 35 years old, the nobody TV cowboy who'd been invited on America's biggest talk show, did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not a nervous smile. The kind of smile that made the entire studio go quiet. The kind that turned Frank Sinatra's face red. The kind that in 5 seconds of silence shifted the entire balance of power in American entertainment. What Clint said next became the most replayed moment in Tonight Show history. But to understand why those words mattered, why they ended Frank Sinatra's reign as Hollywood's untouchable king, you need to understand what brought these two men to this couch. This wasn't just a talk show appearance. This was an execution. Frank Sinatra had invited Clint Eastwood onto The Tonight Show for one reason: to humiliate him in front of the entire country. And for 43 minutes, Frank's plan was working perfectly. Frank Sinatra didn't fear many people. In 1965, he was the chairman of the board, leader of the Rat Pack, the man who could make or break careers with a phone call. But in the fall of 1965, Frank Sinatra was afraid of a TV cowboy named Clint Eastwood. He would never admit it, but the fear was there, keeping him up at night, making him drink more, making him mean, because Clint Eastwood represented everything Frank hated about where entertainment was heading. Frank was old Hollywood suits and ties. You earned your place through years of paying dues. You sang in clubs until your voice was raw. You did whatever the studios demanded. And if you were talented and lucky enough, eventually you wore the crown. Clint Eastwood was New Hollywood, and New Hollywood didn't respect the old rules. Clint had become famous on Rawhide, a television actor, which to Frank's generation meant you were nobody. But then Clint went to Italy, made 3 violent westerns with a director nobody had heard of. Spaghetti westerns, the critics called them. A fistful of dollars. For a few dollars more. Films where the hero wasn't noble, where violence was brutal, where the good guy killed people and didn't lose sleep. The films were massive hits in Europe, and now they were coming to America. Frank had seen the numbers. These weren't just successful films. They were changing what audiences wanted, making Frank's type of entertainment feel old-fashioned. And Frank Sinatra did not do old-fashioned. Clint Eastwood didn't set out to threaten Frank Sinatra. He just wanted to work. Born in San Francisco during the Depression, grew up poor, got drafted, served during Korea, came back, took acting classes, got bit parts. Rawhide was his big break. 7 years playing second fiddle, decent money, steady work. But Clint knew TV actors rarely crossed over to film. Knew at 34 his window was closing. Then Sergio Leone called. Italian director, tiny budget, shooting in Spain. The script was bad, the pay terrible. Every agent in Hollywood told Clint to say no. Clint said yes. A Fistful of Dollars changed everything. The film was raw, violent, stripped down. Clint barely spoke, just squinted, shot people, collected his money. Critics hated it, called it barbaric, called Clint a wooden actor. Audiences loved it. For a few dollars, more did even better. By the time the good, the bad, and the ugly was in production, Clint was the biggest star in Europe that America had never heard of. Until October 1965, when United Artists announced they were releasing the trilogy in the United States. Suddenly, every talk show wanted Clint Eastwood, the mysterious cowboy from the violent Italian westerns, including The Tonight Show. But the invitation didn't come from Johnny Carson's people. It came from Frank Sinatra. Clint should have known something was wrong. Frank Sinatra didn't help unknown actors. He destroyed them. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Clint was at his house in Carmel reading scripts. "Mr. Eastwood, this is Frank Sinatra's office. Mr. Sinatra would like you to appear on The Tonight Show this Friday. He and Dean Martin are guest hosting." Clint's first instinct was to say no. He'd heard the stories. Frank helping young singers, then destroying them on stage. But refusing Frank Sinatra's invitation was career suicide. "Tell Mr. Sinatra I'd be honored." The days before the show, Clint heard whispers. Dean Martin's people calling around asking about Clint. Frank's people watching the Italian westerns, taking notes. Thursday night, Clint got a call from an NBC stage manager. "Clint, I don't know what you did to piss off Sinatra, but be careful tomorrow. Frank's been drinking all week, talking about teaching punk TV actors their place. You're walking into an ambush." Clint thanked him, hung up, sat in the dark thinking. He could cancel, claim he was sick. But Clint Eastwood hadn't survived this long by running from fights, and 50 million people were going to be watching. If Frank Sinatra wanted to humiliate him, at least Clint would go down in front of an audience that mattered. Friday morning, Clint put on his best suit, practiced his squint in the mirror, and drove to Burbank. NBC Studio 6B. 6 p.m., 3 hours before showtime. Clint arrived early, was directed to a dressing room that was barely a closet. Down the hall, he could hear Frank's dressing room. Music, laughter, isinglasses. At 7:30, a production assistant knocked. "Mr. Sinatra would like to see you." Frank sat in a leather chair, drink in hand, Dean on the couch, both in immaculate suits, both looking at Clint like he was dinner. "The cowboy," Frank announced. "Dean, this is the kid who's going to save westerns by making them unwatchable." Dean laughed, said nothing. "Sit down." Frank gestured to a folding chair, not the couch. "You know why you're here? You invited me." "I invited you because 50 million people are about to watch those Italian movies, and I want them to know what they're getting. Not some mysterious star, just a TV actor who got lucky in Europe. You understand?" Clint met Frank's eyes. "I understand." "Good, because Johnny's going to ask about the films, and you're going to be humble. You're going to admit they're just cheap shoot and UPS. And if you do that, we'll have a good time. If you don't..." Frank let the thread hang. Clint stood up. "I'll see you out there, Mr. Sinatra." He walked out, hands steady, heart pounding. 11 p.m., the Tonight Show theme played. Frank and Dean walked out to thunderous applause, waving like kings. For 40 minutes, they did what they did best. Jokes, stories, Sinatra singing, Dean pretending to be drunk. The audience ate it up. Then Johnny Carson said the words Clint had been dreading. "Frank, I understand you have a special guest tonight." "That's right. A young man who's become popular in Europe. Clint Eastwood, come on out." Clint walked through the curtain. Polite applause. Half the audience didn't know who he was. He sat down. Frank on his left, Dean on his right, surrounded. "Clint," Johnny started, "tell us about these Italian westerns." Before Clint could answer, Frank cut in. "I watched one, A Fistful of Dollars. You know what it reminded me of? Those cheap comic books. Lots of shooting. No plot. Zuts, bang, bang, bang." The audience laughed. Clint smiled. "They're not for everyone. Not for anyone with taste," Frank replied. "But Europe loves them. Europe also loves Jerry Lewis." Bigger laugh. Dean grinned. Johnny looked uncomfortable. "Tell me, Clint," Frank continued, "how much acting training did you have?" "Not much formal training. It shows. You barely talk in these movies. You just squint and shoot people. My gardener could do that. My gardener probably has more range than you, pal." The audience gasped. And that's when Clint Eastwood smiled. Frank saw the smile. It made him angrier. "What's funny? You think I'm joking? You're a TV cowboy who made exploitation films in Spain." That's it. The studio went quiet. This wasn't banter. This was an attack. Dean Martin stopped smiling. Johnny tried to intervene. "Frank, no, Johnny. This kid represents everything wrong with Hollywood. Talent doesn't matter anymore. Training doesn't matter. You just need a gimmick. And Clint's gimmick is playing a violent thug who barely speaks. That's not acting. That's garbage." Frank pointed his finger at Clint's chest. The camera zoomed in. 50 million people watching. So tell America the truth. Tell them you're not a movie star. Tell them you're just a lucky TV actor who'll be forgotten in 2 years. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The longest silence in Tonight Show history. Every person waited to see if Clint would break. Clint leaned back, that smile still on his face. And then he spoke, quiet, controlled. "Mr. Sinatra, you're absolutely right. I'm not a trained actor. I didn't study in New York. I didn't pay dues singing in clubs. I'm just a guy who found a different way to tell stories. A way that speaks to people tired of being told what good entertainment should look like. And you're right, that I might be forgotten in 2 years. But I won't be afraid of young people doing things differently. The words hung in the air. Frank Sinatra's face went red, then white. Dean Martin whistled low. "Oh boy." Frank stood up. "You got some nerve, kid. Just telling the truth, Mr. Sinatra, like you asked. You think one good line makes you special? I don't think I'm special. But I also don't think I need your permission to make movies or your approval to succeed. The audience will decide if what I'm doing matters, not you." The studio erupted in applause. Clint extended his hand. "Thanks for having me. I appreciate the platform." Frank stared at the hand, then shook it. "You got guts, kid. I learned from your movies. From Here to Eternity taught me that sometimes you fight even when everyone says you can't win." The audience laughed and applauded. America watched Clint walk off knowing they'd witnessed something historic. By Monday, A Fistful of Dollars had tripled its projected box office. Clint Eastwood was no longer a TV cowboy. He was the man who stood up to Frank Sinatra and won. And 50 years later, the audience was still deciding.